With the room now come to order, we are getting ready to start the committee meeting here. You gentlemen have a seat, please. Can you gentlemen have a seat? Yeah, I got to bring my gavel. They gave me at Ford Motor Company. I ain't used it since. Well, I welcome everybody to the meeting of the Georgia Defense and Veterans Affairs Committee. I want to say a couple of words before we start here that to my committee, all of you that worked long and hard on the Veterans Bill, or Veterans Job Bill, I want to tell you that it all turned out fine. You know, we got everybody satisfied in there except the air conditioning man, if you recall, and I had a number of communications back and forth with him, and he went back, and I was glad he's persistent and worked it all out, and he got satisfied. So that's a long time since I've seen 100% satisfaction, but I hadn't heard any bad things since. So I think it was a good bill the governor put out, and glad we got it taken care of there. Y'all can use that in your campaign that you voted for a good bill there. It's going to be three things I want to do today, and take up the two bills that were announced a while ago over at the House chambers. And then we got a lady, Elizabeth Apley, that has a strong interest in the veterans problem that we are facing now. Well, there's several, you know. Of course, we got the suicide problem and so forth, and it's also the homeless problem. And so she's done some work on this, and we've done some work, and we'll talk about that and see what else we could do on that. But first we'll take the two bills, and I think the House resolution was changed from originally, which is good because it was a joint House-Senate resolution, and it didn't quite make the cutoff time, and so this will be good that it will be heard in time to be handled. So at this time, I'd like to ask Representative Coomer, the governor's floor leader, to come up and present House Resolution 1523. Has everybody got a copy of that?
Thank you, Chairman. And members of the committee, there's a substitute in your folder, LC 21-2525, and essentially what we're doing is making the
we don't have that, do we?
We're making the resolution a House study committee rather than a joint study committee.
Yeah.
As Chairman alluded to, we just kind of ran out of time on this thing this year, and what we hope to do, just kind of give you a little background on why I'm bringing this resolution. I'm currently the only member of the legislature who is in any kind of active role in any military organization. I'm still in the Georgia National Guard, prior active duty and prior reserves, and I'm a JAG in the Georgia Air National Guard. And we have not had a rewrite of the Georgia Code of Military Justice since 1955. And so some of the punishments in there are substantially outdated. We don't think that it's probably very effective. It's probably not a very effective disciplinary tool to fine somebody $5 for a disciplinary infraction. May have been good in 1955, but we really need to update the code. There is, for background purposes, there is a model code that has been vetted and approved by the National Guard Bureau in Washington, D.C., and we are kind of starting with that as our beginning point, but there's going to be a pretty significant departure from that model code in some respects. We know this is going to be a long bill in terms of the number of pages it will take to pass this through, and so I think all of our experience probably leads us to believe that if you're going to have a big, long bill, it's probably best to have a study committee to take care of it in the off season and come back with a good, solid report on that. The work really has already begun on this bill, but it's the purpose of the study committee is to really take a look at what the National Guard JAGs are proposing, and give us time to have feedback and discussion, and then when we come back next year, presuming some of us will get to come back next year, we'll be able to take up this as a piece of legislation next session.
So that's understood in this thing. I haven't had time to read this new version, but that's what you're proposing, that you're going to set up you're going to name a study committee, or is
Yes,
the governor
sir.
going to do it, or who is it?
It's just going to be a House committee, House study committee, so it'll be appointed by the Speaker. 3 members will be appointed by the Speaker, and we'll meet in the off season, in the off session, and we'll hear from witnesses on the issue, and we'll be able to take testimony. And
So that's called for in this resolution?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are there questions from any members of the committee?
Representative Coomer, first of all, can you tell me how many people are on active duty there in Georgia National Guard right now, maybe overseas?
I can't tell you the number that are on active orders right now. We have about 15,000 members total in the Georgia National Guard. We typically have several hundred members deployed at any given time.
That's but there is a significant number that are deployed right now.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And it's a fair statement to say that while they are deployed, that they come under the federal UCMJ. Is that correct?
That's right. They'll be in Title 10 orders, and they'll be subject to the Uniform Code of Military Justice.
And so then when they come back, they go under a different set.
That's right. They're under Title 32 orders if they're called up, and if they're drilling, they're also in Title 32 orders, subject to the state code. And like I said, the state code was written in 1955 and hasn't been really updated since.
So it's probably it'd be a fair statement to say that all the way across the board, we need to get on the ball and update everything.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, got you. Go ahead.
Representative Coomer,
Yes, sir.
how much difference is there between the federal UCMJ and the state UCMJ, or why is there a difference?
Well,
Because they're actually on active duty when they're drilling or when they're away on orders.
the Uniform Code of Military Justice, the federal law, if you will, is of course passed by Congress and signed into law by the President. And there's a significant effort by the military community to update those codes year over year. And so there's been a persistent effort to keep those codes up to date, reflecting the changes in society, reflecting the changes in technology, and the changes in the economy, to make sure that the penalties and that the prohibitions all make sense under the current in society, frankly. The Georgia Code of Military Justice, which applies only to Georgia National Guard members when they're on duty, or only to Georgia National Guard members who are not in an active federal status, has not had the same updates, the same look after, and it frankly has just fallen into disrepair, if you will. It's become antiquated.
What would be the difficulty with having the federal standards the same as the state?
Well, the federal standards are intended to apply in situations that may not apply in the state setting,
Such as
an international when units are stationed in overseas settings. We don't have units that are stationed overseas that are in Title 32 status. They would go into Title 10 status, and those sections would apply. So we don't have that to deal with. Also, just the process is going to be a little bit different. In the Uniform Code of Military Justice, you have provision for courts-martial, ranging from summary courts-martial up to general courts-martial, followed by an appeal process through the service branches Court of Appeals up to the Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces, and then on into the federal civilian system for appeals. So we won't have that complexity to deal with. Our hope is that, and I don't know what the final bill is going to look like, but our hope is that we'll have some kind of process that incorporates a military court-martial, possibly followed by an appeal to a state court system. So there are going to be specific state and federal differences. The other thing is the federal code has a provision that essentially incorporates substantive state law, so that if you break a state law, you can be punished. You can be punished in the court-martial. So if I'm out, if a military member is DUI in Atlanta, Georgia, but they're on active duty, they can be prosecuted under a court-martial by incorporating that state law into the federal court-martial statute. I don't think we will have. We probably won't have exactly the same thing in the Georgia code, but suffice to say there are differences, and it wouldn't be as easy as simply cutting and pasting the federal code into the state code.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, did I have another question?
We have one.
Just one quick question in reference to Representative Jeffenballs. Isn't it probably a pretty fair assumption that of the 50 states and the National Guards in all 50 states that there probably is a separate uniform code of justice for both state and federal for every one of those states? That's why we have it.
That's right. We actually have 54 National Guard agencies across the United States and the territories, and each one of those has its own state. Let me say it this way. Each one of them can have their own state code of military justice. It's hard for me to imagine that there are states that don't have it or territories that don't have it, but they all could have it, and I would assume that they do. I don't want somebody to come back later and say, oh, you forgot, the Virgin Islands don't have a code of military justice. Something like that.
But the majority of the states would.
That's right.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. And I also want to say thank you to Representative Holcomb, who was a co-signer on the resolution, and also I think Chairman Willard is here, who was a co-signer, and I think Representative Atwood was our other co-signer. All 4 military JAGs. I hope I didn't miss anybody in the House that's a former military JAG, but thank you, gentlemen, for your service and your help on this resolution.
I didn't know all that. I'll have to give them more respect in the future, I guess.
Or give them a harder time.
That's good. That's good. You still want to? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if the time is appropriate, I'd like to make a motion that this House resolution do pass.
Is any other questions before we do? All in favor of passage of House resolution? Let's see, it's the new one. Still got the same name, same number. 1523. Let it be known by raising your right hand. I believe it's. Let's see. I didn't have no. Anyway, it was it's passed. I didn't count the number, but was anybody against it? No, I don't see anything.
Thank you, Chairman.
All right, thank you. Senate. Where's the Senate one? Right now we'll consider Senate Bill 520. Excuse me, 320. I'm sorry, 320. Senator Harbison of the Senate Veterans, Military, and Homeland Security Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Also, if I can ask Chairman Willard to come up as well, and I believe he's going to speak with me on this. And first of all, thank you all very much for taking this up, and appreciate the work that Chairman Yates, you did on this bill, as well as Chairman Willard and myself and a lot of other people out here in the audience who perfected the legislation, worked very hard to come up with something that will address a problem that's very serious for our veterans and try to deal with it in a way that will make them productive members of society. And hopefully we can get that done through this legislation. Initially, it was a bill that would sort of implement everything and get the ball rolling with all of the fiscal notes and all those things involved. But with input from various people who had interest in it and the judicial area and arena, we came back with this enabling legislation instead that will enable it, put the framework up there, and then based on the information that we get from other jurisdictions here in Georgia and other places, we can have the best possible piece of legislation to address our veterans here in the state. We worked over the summer under a committee headed up by Chairman Willett with all aspects, and our Commissioner Pete Wheeler in his office had serious input in that. They conducted it. So we ask for favorable consideration once we conclude the information and satisfy your questions and input. Thank you.
I think it's much needed. I get calls and everything on this, and I think it's a good step in the right direction. Representative Willard?
I'll just add a few comments you saw in the paper maybe this morning. They were talking about the Veterans Court that is set up in Fulton County and the great work they're doing. I'm sorry, Judge Markle, that's who it is. And what we're trying to establish here is a framework that could be used throughout the state in the numerous superior courts, much as we have with our other alternative courts, as we call them, and that is to have, like with drug courts, DUI courts, mental health courts, we have a specific need here for those veterans who are facing specific type problems, whether it be related with drugs or alcohol or other problems, where they can get the type of counseling as well as a mentor to work with them who has a veteran background. So there'd be a relationship cemented between that mentor and the veterans and his problems or her problems. So this is to give the framework. It's an alternative type court system that is used within the superior courts, and we think it's long over needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone have a question? Either one of the gentlemen. Representative Prince.
Representative. As I read this and the way you explain it, so this is a court on top of within, okay, and it is a special court for veterans only. Correct. Okay. And I guess I'm sort of trying to figure out why. I mean, if we talk about mental illness and things like that, there are courts that sort of deal with that. You talk about DUI, you talked about, things like that. There are special courts for that. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm a veteran, first of all. So I'm all for veteran benefits. However, being a veteran, I don't expect special treatment. Mm-hmm. And to me, for what's been briefed and what I read, sounds like special treatment for veterans versus any average citizen. So please explain that.
If you show me what you're talking about, I'd be glad to deal with the alleged special treatment, because that's not what it's all about. If you will read it, it's all up to the discretion of the judge. But more importantly, offenses like murder and rape and those kinds of things, absolutely, that wouldn't even cross a judge's mind, or it wouldn't be allowed under this legislation.
Okay, but a DUI would.
Yes, if it's DUI, possibly up under the discretion of the judge, possibly.
But there is a DUI court already in some places.
But this would deal with the DUI court as it relates to some problem that may be residual effects from a person serving in combat, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, whatever the case may be. This is looking at that problem. But let me tell you the larger picture of it. Whenever you get BRAC coming into town, what they look at are things like this, whether we are Purple Heart State, whether we're part of the Interstate Compact as it relates to military children. We are. We've sort of dotted all the I's and crossed the T's to make sure that we line up extremely favorable. And they look at these things, and this would be one of the things they look at the Veterans Court. I attended a National Court of State State Legislature convention right here in Atlanta, and that was a hierarchy kind of thing, and we were not at the top because we didn't have that one item. And I just think this will put us on a very good footing towards that. Fort Benning is here. Obviously, we've done a lot of things in Columbus as an example to make sure that we express our appreciation to the veteran, but more importantly, they're not given special treatment. They're just given the attention they deserve.
Okay, and I'm out of Augusta, which we have Fort Gordon there, so there are a lot of veterans in that area. Me being one of them. Yes. And again, from what I just want to make sure that this is not something that, as a veteran, right. That I feel that I'm, privileged, because I volunteered to serve. We all did. I mean, most of us did. Yes.
Representative,
I know you've been around. You've been around a while, but
the difference is this. I think primarily the difference is two things. As Senator pointed out, a lot of the military who are coming back from overseas are coming back with trauma issues that are not known to perhaps exist until they start down a certain path, whether it be using drugs, alcohol problems. And so there is a need with having a way of getting these people into, if they violate the law before a judge, and recognize there are benefits available to them, special benefits through VA, and being sure that they're getting the proper connection with VA, and also this, as I mentioned earlier, the mentoring. There's a number of veterans organizations in Georgia that are wanting to help these veterans out. And so the court does set up a unique program for those veterans through the mentoring, as well as being sure they are brought forward with proper VA connections to get assistance they need. And what they plan to do is, as this veteran stays in the program over a period of time, they will dismiss the charges that may have brought that veteran before the court. But it's only those situations are specialized as to what we consider veteran needs.
okay. So based on that, are we going to have to hire and I say we, wherever county, are they going to have to hire a special lawyer
No,
to, that's able to identify those types of illnesses and pertaining to veterans that have served in the wars and things like that? Or
If they're known to be a veteran and have come before a superior court on a criminal accusation or indictment, then the point is that is a time for intervention that could help out that person and stop them from whatever continuing problems they're having. And it's strictly a optional, voluntary type of court for the local circuits decide to set up. For instance, the Muskogee County Superior Court may decide, I think you already have one. Yeah. They have them there, they have it in Atlanta, but there's not been a framework under which they could operate. There's been sort of a loosey thing they've tried to put together. So this was to give the structured framework for that court to operate. If that helps answer.
Representative Glanton is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I certainly understand the point of view that my colleague has just made, and I think we differ in respect to, I do believe veterans deserve special treatment. I understand that this is not what this is intended to do, but in my opinion, they do. Similar to what we're doing with drug courts now, because we want folks to have a thorough look at, if you will, to see what's behind that's causing them to do the things that they do, and I think it's appropriate to do that. I further think that most of the issues that are concerning our veterans out here are things that happen or were initiated as a result of their service in the armed forces. And so I just think that it's appropriate for us to treat them special, as we do with hospitals. I mean, we have existing hospitals, but yet we still have the Veterans Administration and hospitals and things that are specifically related to military service. And so I thank you for bringing this bill, and I certainly support it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to commend both of you and applaud you for your work on this. This is a very important effort. I've served for the last several years in the military veterans section of the State Bar and also on their military legal assistance program, and this has been one of their main efforts as well. And I know a lot of work has gone into this. And so, again, I want to thank you and applaud you for your leadership on this. My understanding is that, one, these exist throughout the country and are becoming increasingly popular. And to Chairman Willard's point, is these are actually already here in Georgia too. We have them in Fulton County. It exists in Augusta. And so what this does is this reflects what's already happening and gives a framework and a structure for us to build it throughout the state. Is that fairly accurate?
Let me add to that too, Representative Holcomb. The court system we have in Georgia have to have, in effect, an authorization to do what we call these specialized courts. and there has not been one recognizing the specialty need of the veteran courts. We have legislation authorizing drug courts, DUI courts, family courts. This is going to the specific type courts, as you say, already being set up and used in a number of counties, but it's been a loose organization per se.
Right. So this gives them the framework in the code to move things forward. So, yeah, I very much appreciate it. I'm very supportive, and thank you again.
Thank you, sir.
Representative Rogers.
Yeah, I think Representative Holcomb stole my thunder. But what he was saying was the private conversation we were having. No, I'm just kidding. First of all, I never know how to refer to my colleague down here as representative or colonel. I don't know which one carries more accolades. I refer to him as colonel. I think that's probably a higher honor, and I appreciate his service tremendously. I think I'm like Representative Glanton. We may disagree. I believe that veterans deserve maybe a little bit more of a special attention, but. I guess the point that I'd like to make, and it kind of tag team on Representative Holcomb here, is that for the past couple of years since I've been here, has it not been part of both the legislative and the executive agenda moving forward to try to do something about the court systems and the criminal justice systems? One year we took on criminal justice, and we took on juvenile justice, and then this is just simply nothing but an integral part of continuing that. If we can get somebody into the right program, then we don't see them anymore.
Well, we call it reform, and I think what we're trying to look at is the fact that there are certain people who get involved in the criminal justice system that are their alternative ways of taking care of their problems rather than just locking them up. And we've had too long that frame of mind. You broke the law, you did the crime, you do the time, and it's just not everything fits in that same package. Certainly there are dangerous people are dangerous to us in society that need to be put away. But a lot of them aren't in that same mold. They've done things, whether juveniles or adults, maybe one or two times. And what we're trying to do is find a way to steer them back, make them a productive person in society. And this is one of those measures.
And I think, it's probably also fair to say that the recidivism rate based on these accountability courts is way, way, way down. I applaud you on this. I think it's a good move. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd just like to know, Chairman Harbison, how do you attract such high-class help here?
Actually, I'm tracking him. He's a great role model, and I just value his opinion and input. Just incidentally, he was in the Marine Corps, I believe.
That's right.
And we just say simplify to each other.
I congratulate you. You signed up the best. Is anybody else have a comment on? Oh wait, yeah, we got one. I'm sorry. It's all. No, we covered it all. Is anybody else? I just want to know if we're honored today to have Commissioner Wheeler here with us, one of my best friends, and his two able staff members there, the two assistants. I just wonder if you all had any comment or want to say anything.
We'd like to thank every member of this great committee for all you have done and continue to do to help the veterans and everything that's involved. You've done a great job, and we appreciate it very much.
Well, we appreciate your help over there. Okay. Well, you never let us down when we call on you to help veterans, and I think I want to say that this is a step in the right direction here. I'm for anything to help veterans along the way, and I get calls all the time from problems that veterans have, and it's certainly good to see so many people interested in making things better for them, and I appreciate it very much. Now, do I have a motion from anybody? Number two.
Mr. Chairman, if proper, I'd like to make a motion that this pass.
Go ahead. It's time right now.
I'd like to move that it's motion that this bill 320, Senate Bill 320 pass.
Do we have a second? Second, Representative Glenn. All in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? Unanimous to pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Congratulations. Thank you very much.
Oh, hey.
We are now going to hear from get into another subject. It's not a bill. With Miss Elizabeth Apley. Let me say before you start that this is about discussion on the homeless situation with veterans, and it is a problem. My legislative assistant did some research on this and checked with the city of Atlanta and various ones, and it's this a lot of work has been done on this to try to help veterans along the way, because it is a problem when it seems when they come back and try to get a job and try to get a place to stay and so forth. So this time I'd like to hear from this lady who's done a lot of work on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Elizabeth Apley. I'm an attorney, and I'm here today representing Housing Georgia. We very much thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee, for giving us a few minutes to give an overview. We had hoped to be able to have the time to bring experts and a full presentation. That will have to wait until the intercession. But this is a very urgent crisis facing the state of Georgia. Housing Georgia is a statewide coalition of advocacy organizations working to improve access to affordable housing across the state. We see housing as a basic, fundamental human need. It's the foundation for healthy families and healthy living, for access to good jobs, for financial well-being, and is a key building block for living the American dream. The members of our steering committee, and we are in formation, include the Georgia State Trade Association for Nonprofit Developers, the Atlanta Housing and Nonprofit Developers, the Georgia Alliance to End Homelessness, the AARP of Georgia, Metro Fair Housing, Lutheran Family Services, Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers Foundation, the Faith Alliance of Metro Atlanta, the Georgia Conference of Black Mayors, Step Up Savannah, and Georgians for Prosperity, and that list is growing. We are facing a crisis for veterans' homelessness in this country. In Georgia, estimates are from the experts that 27,000 people are sleeping on the street every night, and that 1 in 4 of those homeless people are veterans who have served their country. You know, we all went through the snowstorm in the last few weeks, and we had minor or some major inconveniences. But when you think of what happened to those veterans sleeping on the street, who were in danger of losing their very lives from the assault of the cold and the exposure, or if they were living in substandard housing somewhere and their pipes froze or they lost their heat, they then become the next homeless statistic. And so the problem is that Georgia is not doing all that it could to address the problem of homelessness. We know, for example, that there are people who are homeless who served their country. They are homeless because of post-traumatic stress syndrome. It may be because of untreated mental or emotional challenges that they face as a result of reentry to civilian life. But we also know it's a problem of poverty. 80% of homeless veterans are eligible to receive services. The vast majority are eligible to receive service from the VA, but fewer than a third are actually getting those services. So you can see how this discussion dovetails with the legislation that you just passed. We are dealing with a population who we have a commitment to. We speak all the time of our commitment to our veterans. We have to put that into practice. And so when we look at the problem of veterans' homelessness in Georgia, the numbers are actually quite startling. There are 461,000 veteran households in this state, about 13% of all the households in Georgia. And we know that Georgia is unfortunately 5th in the country in the percentage of severely cost-burdened, extremely low-income veterans. And what this says is we have got a lot of veterans earning low incomes that put them into the category, and you can see on this map on the second page before you, 81% of these extremely low-income veterans are facing housing burdens. The cost of housing is more than 60% of their total income. Okay, you can't survive. You know, we all use a rule of thumb: 25%, 30% of your income should be used for housing. When you're dealing with this population of people with extremely low incomes, they're forced to spend a vastly higher percentage of their income. And this puts Georgia into the very top percentile of these people in need. And what happens when you're forced to pay a high percentage of a disproportionately high percentage of your income on housing is that you're a step away from homelessness. So what can we do about it? I mean, what can we do about it? And you've taken excellent steps. I know you all helped me a few years back with a great unemployment insurance bill focused on your military families, and you took a great step with this Veterans Court today. But the reality is that Georgia has not been investing in affordable housing options. That the only money the state appropriates for affordable housing is to the Homeless Trust Fund. And that number, the appropriation, has remained static at about $3 million for decades. It hasn't changed. And yet we know the problem of homelessness and of veterans' homelessness is growing enormously. And so what we have to do in looking at this situation is we need to increase the supply and the services for emergency shelter. Okay, once someone ends up homeless, we have to be able to serve them on an emergency basis. We also have to connect them to services and resources that they're entitled to as veterans. We need to create options that transition them out of homelessness and into permanent housing. And then you get to the real nub of the problem, and that is to prevent homelessness. And Georgia has got to start investing in a continuum of options available in Atlanta, in our rural communities, in our suburbs that allow people to access housing that is within their means and that is safe and decent. And so we look forward to the opportunity to bring to you the real experts who can present this in a more fulsome way. I know that in these final days of the session, every minute is precious, so I'm grateful for your time and attention. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, and if I don't know the answer, I will get you the information.
Representative Rogers.
Elizabeth, I applaud you on this. First of all, just one quick suggestion. I promise I'm not going to talk about everything that comes up today, but I sat there and I looked at your list of people that are involved in this thing. I represent a very rural district, and I want to point out that homelessness with veterans as well as everybody else is not just a metro problem. It is very much, or an urban problem. It's very much of a rural problem. I was wondering if you might possibly be able to bring in like the Georgia Municipal Association, the ACCG, and then also, VFW, and things of this nature to bring more of an awareness to it.
Absolutely.
I think it's something that if we're trying to find money and you can bring it before the legislature, it's good to be able to go all across the board and to show the effects in South Georgia as well as the mountains of North Georgia, not just the urban areas. And I applaud you for what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we agree with you 100%, and we are working to make this as representative of the breadth of Georgia communities as possible, because you're exactly right. The problem affects all communities.
Nobody else? I'm looking at this article in Governing Magazine. Have you seen that?
No, I don't know. Mr. Chairman, what issue is that? What date?
Well, it's the most recent one, I think. Here's February 24th. And it's, as usual, somebody has optimistic views when maybe ahead of time it said a homelessness breakthrough. Cities reach a milestone for veterans. And, we researched with what Atlanta was doing and whatever. And I don't know. I guess that we need to do some research and to see what all these people are doing that report all their breakthroughs and all their great progress and so forth. And maybe it never does reach down to the place. And I say on behalf of our Veterans Affairs people here, they point out that for a veteran to get help, he's got to ask for it. It's different
Yes.
from a lot of other
Right.
things. But and I don't know whether they might have suggestions on this situation also. And maybe we need to look a little further and see just how extensive it is in the various areas and everything, I guess, and know where is the best way to start working on it. But I guess it never be settled by some big budget breakthrough with either the federal government or the state. You know, the state is far more limited than the feds, because I guess that most of the money situation is usually comes from the feds.
You're exactly right.
That's where most of the veterans got their problems, by fighting the wars and whatever, you know.
But you're exactly right. The overwhelming majority of housing money in Georgia, whether it's for home ownership or for rental support or for emergency shelters, is federal money. But it's too little, it's unreliable, and Georgia is not doing what other states are doing to help their folks. You know, on top of the veterans, we now know Georgia has 58,000 homeless school children. Okay, homeless school children, grades K through 12. And so how do we expect those 58,000 children to go to school, to pay attention, to do their homework when they have no home? So it's a big problem. I mean, these are the people who have served, the people we're counting on for our future, and if they have no home, there's no foundation to build a life.
Well, how does that come about with the Department of Family and Children's Services and all that? And there's an overwhelming large number of people who would like to take in kids as their own, you know. And
these are children with their families. The whole family is homeless, but what we're counting in the public schools these days
is it lack of jobs mainly?
Unemployment and lack of affordable housing. When we talk about affordable housing, what we look at is, what is the area median income? How much can a person reasonably expect to earn? Well, too many people nowadays are earning minimum wage. You would have to earn twice the minimum wage, more than twice the minimum wage, in order to afford a 2-bedroom apartment any place in Georgia. I mean, we're looking at averages, obviously, but we're looking at averages by community. So you can see these are even working families, okay, but more than twice the minimum wage, $15 an hour, is what it would take to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in this state these days.
Yes, Representative Glenn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to ask a question, then I've got to ask to be excused to get to education meeting. But I'd be interested in seeing how Georgia compares to states like Florida and Texas and other states where veterans are settling down at. And the comparisons that I would like to see is those primarily with housing, with vocational rehabilitation, and education, and not just how many veterans we have in the numbers, but where does Georgia actually rank in taking care of veterans? This is something that's been a passion of mine for some years, and I'd just like to see the numbers compared state by state, where we are in the rankings in regards to how well we take care of veterans, even without federal dollars. What is Georgia doing?
Oh, without federal dollars?
What is Georgia doing? I'm interested in knowing what Georgia.
You remember how the size of those small index cards? That's what we could put about what Georgia's doing for home.
Well, maybe Georgia
small.
don't know that, and maybe we need to put it in some form of that Georgians can understand what we're not doing for those who serve us and sacrifice sometimes the lives of the family members and loved ones. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Would our veterans friends have a thought you want to give on this? I know that any suggestions. I guess right now we're in the probing move of trying to find out. I think we got to do a lot more work to find out the extent of the problem and where it is and what we can do about it.
Dan Holtz,
say that we would like to, be involved in how this is put together, because we do see some of these veterans coming into our offices, and also we've had at both of our veterans homes, we've had homeless veterans who have ended up being admitted there. It's not as many today as it was actually about probably 10 years ago, but we have seen the problem, and so I think we would be interested in getting involved in the process and trying to find some form of a solution, and that what Georgia can do to address this issue.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other suggestions you got? We, as I say, obviously, this is just scratching the surface today.
Yes, sir.
As I told you, we would not be able to come with any solutions today, I mean, as you knew. And this lady is a very sharp lady I've dealt with over the years here as she probes around to try to help people. And so that I just wanted to give her an opportunity to lay out the problem today, and so that we got a minute to look after. As I say, I'm still shaking my head when I think about that. I read where there was more veterans died at their own hands than have been killed by the Taliban, and it seems miraculous to me, because I think it's a different war from the one we fought, where we knew where the front lines were, but now some of these people can get killed by babies because of the way these wars recently been fought. Does anybody else have anything else they'd like to add to it? I appreciated very much what happened today. There's a lot of people, all of us sitting around here, either still serving, interested in Veterans Affairs, and I think it's a healthy thing that, to me, I don't know anybody that you talk to that don't say they're for veterans, and and I think we have been defended so many times by so many veterans that when you think about how many were in World War II, the one I was in, when you think about, 16 to 17 million veterans, and man, that's a whole lot of people, even out of a large country like this. But I think we've had a good meeting today to start thinking about some of these things, and we'll be in touch. You know where my office is, and we'll bring things to our attention and bring our friends into it.
Yes, sir.
And at some point, maybe we'll even bring the National Guard folks into it, because they're just a few steps away from veterans. But does anybody else have anything else before we
Thank you, Mr.
break
Chairman.
up? Nobody. Appreciate very much everybody coming. We are dismissed.